भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। नारायणं नमस्कृत्यं नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरये। हरि ओम, जय गुरुदेव. So I will just chant the shloka which we did yesterday. सर्वभूतस्थितं यो मां भजते कत्वमास्थितः सर्वथा वर्तमानोऽपि स योगी मयि वर्तते. The one who gains vision, having gained the oneness of me, abiding me in all beings, that yogi abides in me, whatever he or she does. For the person who has the vision, Shastra is no longer applicable. What Shastra is with reference to dharma and adharma no longer applies to the person who is both dharma and adharma. This must be clearly understood.
Jai Gurudev Bela.
Internet is not Ramaraji.
Yes, I know it is not. It is audible that there is a shake there. So I will take over. I will share screen as well. Because you will be here for about half an hour today, isn't it?
Yeah, Brahmaraji. If you want me to share the screen for half an hour, I can do that.
Yeah, just keep it on. Let me get my screen ready. Till then, you can keep this.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, I think I've got the screen. I will share it. So we've stopped at this. This is what you read just now, right?
No, Brahmaraji. इससे पहले वाला, I think
31.
नहीं, नीचे सर्वभूतस्थता, सर्वभूत वाला.
But we did not do this, no? Atma Pampyena yesterday. We stopped at Nitya Aparoksha.
Okay, okay. No problem. I just read the shloka and headline.
Okay, that's fine. So yesterday we saw that being Nitya Aparoksha, Swamiji brought us to the fact that Paroksha is something that we believe. Pratyaksha is something that we perceive. And because Atma is not an object, it is not Pratyaksha. And it is Nitya Aparoksha because it is always there. And what he's talking about here is of a Jnani's Lakshana. So for a Jnani, it is always self-evident. So being Nitya Aparoksha, Atma is Nitya Mukta, always liberated. Knowledge makes the person recognize the fact of being ever liberated. This is why the person is also called Jivan Mukta. Living, the person gains the knowledge that is liberation. Once this knowledge has been gained, let the person do whatever he wants, perform Vaidika karma or not. teach or not teach. Let the person be in any stage of life and perform any action. He or she is still with me alone. Even for the sake of argument, if such a person were to commit murder, the person would not be away from me because he or she is not a doer. The next question, of course, is could such a person commit such a crime? No, says Krishna in the next verse. Wrong action is not possible for the person. Atmaupamyena sarvatra sarvam samam pashyati Arjuna sukham va yadi va dukkham sayogi paramo mataha. Atmaupamyena sarvatra samam pashyati Arjuna sukham va yadi va dukkham sayogi paramo mataha. Arjuna, O Arjuna, yaha, the one who, sarvatra, everywhere, sukham va, either pleasure, yadi va dukkham, or pain, atma aupamyena, taking oneself as an example or basis, samam, the same, pashyati, sees, saha, that, yogi, paramaha, the most exalted, mataha, is regarded. So, Arjuna, yaha sarvatra dukham va yadi va dukkham, atma aupamyena samam pashyati, taha yogi paramaha mataha. If one who, taking oneself as an example or basis in all situations, sees either pleasure or pain as the same, that yogi, O Arjuna, is regarded as the most exalted. Here Krishna obviates the problem of whether the wise person can perform any action of adharma by showing that there is no way of his doing that. For such a person, Atma, oneself, is the upama, the example. The self itself becomes the example. Atma aupamya. One who is oneself as an example sees that which is equal in all beings, sarvatra samam pashyati, as being equal to oneself alone. The person does not look upon others from any other matrix except himself or herself alone. With reference to all beings, the vision is equal, the same. One looks upon others as oneself alone on the basis of the example of oneself. This is one meaning. There is also another meaning, which we shall see later. In the second line of the verse, the vision of sameness is pointed out in terms of happiness and pain. Sukham va, dukkham va. My happiness, sukha, my welfare is highly desirable to me and therefore I go for it, which is the same for everyone. Every being is equally interested in its own sukha. Therefore, I become the matrix, the basis for my interaction with other beings. Similarly, dukkha is what is not desirable for me or for anyone else either. The basis of dharma. Here you can see how dharma itself is born. The very basis of dharma is the universal mutual expectation of people. What I expect of others is what others expect of me. If what is desirable, sukha, for me is desirable for others, and what is undesirable, dukkha, for me is undesirable for others also, then there is a common basis, which is what is meant by dharma. Having the vision of sameness in all beings, then, the person discussed here does not do what is not desirable. Therefore, what Krishna said in the previous verse, whatever the person does, he or she remains in me. Sarvatha vartamanaha api mai vartate is further explained here. What was said there could be misunderstood to mean that a jnani could do things that are adharma, and yet he remains an Ishvara. Therefore, answering the question, will such a person do actions that are considered to be wrong, adharma? Krishna says no. It is not possible because what is good for the jnani is good for others too. And what is bad for the jnani is bad for others too. If the jnani does not like getting hurt, then he or she is not going to hurt anyone else. In this way, non-injury, ahimsa, becomes natural to the jnani. Even for a viveki, a simple, mature person, ahimsa is a very common dharma. And for a jnani, one who has lived a life of dharma and who has deliberately pursued and gained the knowledge, dharma becomes spontaneous, very natural. If you look at any crime, like hurting another person, or any kind of action considered to be adharma, behind it there is always a small ego. Every ego is small, in fact. A big ego is also small. Any ego being just a bubble filled with air. Whether the bubble is big or small, it is nothing but air. That is all there is to this ego business. Just so much air. Ego itself is a false entity, and this false entity is behind every crime, large or small. Shall I go ahead, or does anyone want a repeat of any paragraph? So when the jnani looks at everybody as himself, taking himself as an example, so what is good for him is good for others. What is not good for him is of course not good for others. So when everything he sees as himself, as sameness, then there is no way he will commit a crime. It's like the left hand doing harm to the right hand. That's not possible. He feels belonged and connected to everyone. So there is only dharma that he will do. There is no adharmic act that he can do. So there is no way such a person, although he is above the pairs of opposites, can commit a crime. And therefore ahimsa becomes very natural to him. It becomes his nature. And the nature of the ego is nothing but a bubble of air. And this is behind every crime. And the jnani is above the ego. So therefore he's certainly not going to be affected by that. Because ego itself is a false entity. Ego is anatma. The nature of the ego. And what kind of ego is this? The ego of an insecure person. An insecure ego that has fear and greed. Because it has fear and greed, it is insecure. Because it is insecure, it is frightened. A frightened person or a greedy person can perform actions that are not very committed to dharma. In fact, all unbecoming actions stem from the insecure ego, and no ego is secure. Because the nature of the ego is isolation, there is duality, dvaita. So as long as there is separation, there is this ego. And as long as there is ego, there is going to be insecurity because ego itself is insecure. And as long as there is this ego and this insecurity, there will be fear and greed. In the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, it is said that whenever there is duality, there will be fear. Dvitiyat vai bhayam bhavati. A similar statement is found in the Taittiriya Upanishad, conveying the same sense. Udaramantaram kurute atha tasya bhayam bhavati. The original duality is the duality between the individual, Jiva, and Ishvara, the Lord, Jiveshvara Dvaita, meaning that Ishvara is something other than myself. This Dvaita makes you small. If Ishvara is everything else, you become whatever is left out. Naturally, then, you become small. Everything else is infinitely large and you are small. And once this original Dvaita is there, there is the Dvaita between one individual and another, Jiva Jiva Dvaita, and between the Jiva and the world, Jiva Jagat Dvaita. This is such a wonderful paragraph. So the original duality is between Jiva and Ishvara. So if Ishvara is everything else, including like what Persiji was mentioning yesterday, the dark energy and everything else in the universe, automatically the Jiva will feel small. Like he is what is left over. Everything else is Ishvara and he is the leftover part. So this Jiva Ishvara Dvaita is the original Dvaita, and from this stems the Jiva Jiva Dvaita, the difference between one individual and the other. And then the Jiva Jagat Dvaita. And whenever there is Dvaita, there is fear.
But then
Dvitiya,
it's supposed to compare with the Ishvara, right? But Dvaita means Jiva Ishvara Dvaita. That's the one he said. And then if Ishvara is everything else, you become whatever is left out. Okay.
because you still feel isolated, you consider yourself as Jiva, you identified yourself as the Jiva. The original Dvaita is between you and Ishvara. And then you also start seeing differences between you and the other Jivas. I, me is different from you, yours. So that difference comes up.
Mm-hmm.
So there is no sameness. This is antithesis of that Samadarsha Bhava.
Yeah. So there's the Dvaita Bhava. That can you read that one? This 1 and 2. Maybe they may have footnote.
1 and 2 is it? Okay, I will
Yeah.
read that. Brihadaranyaka chapter 1, fourth shloka, I think. Taittiriya Upanishad is chapter 2, the 7th shloka. So that is, it is Dvitiyat vai bhayam bhavati. That is from Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Whenever there is duality, wherever there is duality, there will be fear.
That's from the Taittiriya Upanishad.
That is the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. From the Taittiriya Upanishad, it is Udara mantaram kurute atha tasya bhayam bhavati. Antaram is difference. So when you start seeing the difference, then atha tasya bhayam bhavati. From there, fear emerges.
Arises. Okay. All right. Thank you.
So
although Hariom, it is
yes.
although it looks very simple statement, but it has such a large application if we see at the macro level, whether it is environment or whether it is about animals or whether it is about the Prithvi Tattva itself. It is so beautiful. When there is no duality, then we become sensitive to each and every particle around us, right?
So beautiful. And this is what creates comfort zone. This difference is what creates comfort zones. We'll say, okay, my family belongs to me, so I will take care of my comfort zone is restricted to the family. We see that separation. They, I, mine and them. So that difference comes up. That comfort, you draw boundaries. You start drawing boundaries. Whereas for enlightened beings like Gurudev and all the enlightened masters, there is no separation, which is why
So
also
the fear, why is the fear there in getting it here? Because of the, I know the ego, you're not secure, that will arise the fire, fear, or whatever other thing. But here, the duality, there will be fear. But what creates the fear here?
the duality itself. Because the moment you have a duality, I is different from the other. The
Yeah.
original duality is Jiva and Ishvara. So if you remember in Tattva Bodh, we learned Jiva says, Aham kinchignaha, aham alpagnaha. I am small, I have limited knowledge.
So
Whereas
you
Jiva
think
is
about yourself like smaller.
Ishvara, Svagnaha, Sarvavyapi.
So you always have somebody else
So
powerful
you're
than.
already cutting across a difference there, cutting across a line and saying, I am separate from Ishvara. So when you do that, or your ego is already, the ego bubble has already come. It is there and that is functioning, isn't it? So whenever there is isolation or ego, there will be insecurity. And from this insecurity stems the fear and greed, because you want to get out of that too, insecurity. You want to feel secure.
Yeah, and that then arises all types of crime. Crime doesn't mean in literal sense, but even the mental crime, no, when we feel jealous, when we feel small, when we feel inferior, or the other way around. These all are adharma. Crime, here Swamiji mentions, it doesn't mean that with knife and...
Correct. Manasa, Vacha, Karmana. It is all the three. And
yes.
And the fact that, Bela, you brought out this beautiful concept that even the environment, you feel one with the environment. You don't feel separate. Gurudev, that is why he does not feel separate even from the Panchamahabhutas. That is why even in cold climes like in the North Pole and all, what he has is just a simple little shawl, whereas everybody else is wearing layers and layers of clothes. Because for him, he is same. I mean, whether it's cold, hot, it does not make a difference to him. That is the ultimate Advaita, where there is no difference at all, even between amongst the five elements. This is a little offshoot, but this is what occurred to me yesterday, and I thought I will share it with respect to the environment and with respect to how we talk and how we speak. Why speaking calm, speaking words of from a calm sense rather than from a negative space is important, is because supposing not supposing, all the Panchamahabhutas are considered as devatas, fire, air, water, ether. So if you want to be prayerful to all of them, then you should say words that are kind, that are pleasant. Any words that are unpleasant, when you utter, it is like you are disrespecting the environment around you, whether it be the air, the space around you. So every time we say an unkind word or even think an unkind thought, you're actually disrespecting. You're doing the opposite of being prayerful. So keeping this little aspect in mind, then whatever we say, again with alertness, Karma Yogi has to be completely alert. So with that alertness and awareness, if we can live, then we will have this Vak Tapas with us. I just wanted to mention this.
Yeah, that is so beautiful. Alertness. And with that, you leave, energy is never destroyed. So whatever, whether it is negativity or positivity, it remains in the surrounding. So why not spread the positivity rather than even through vibrations or thoughts of ours? Prahlada had seen these in Jada, Chaitanya, everywhere he had seen Ishvara only. So he never had complaint against his own father, right? I think that was the difference.
Yeah, he never questioned his father, as in, why are you doing this to me? Why me? He never had this why me question. He was happily in his blissful state.
And for that respect, for that matter, every devotee, I mean Meera or Narsi Mehta, they never had any complaint for the Jagat or for their inner circle, whatever. They always had that aikyata with the Ishvara and the Jagat.
Yeah. So now if the duality between Jiva and between Jiva and Jagat is real, then the duality between Jiva and Ishvara is also real. Why? Because if the Jiva Dvaita and the Jiva Jagat Dvaita are real, there must be an Ishvara other than this Jagat. Then that Ishvara is just another guy, like any other Jiva. And between him and the other Jivas, including myself, there will be a difference. Also, between all these Anatmas and myself, there will be difference. All the way then there is difference. There being Dvaita between the Jivas, the Jagat and Ishvara. If there is Dvaita between the Jivas, between the Jiva and Jagat, and between the Jagat and Ishvara, if there is Dvaita between these three, then your isolation is established. Mortality is established. Imperfection is established. Inadequacy is established, all of which are accompanied by fear, greed, pain, sorrow, etc. I will read this one more time. If the duality between Jiva and between Jiva and Jagat is real, then the duality between Jiva and Ishvara is also real. Why? Because if the Jiva Dvaita and the Jiva Jagat Dvaita are real, there must be an Ishvara other than this Jagat. Then that Ishvara is just another guy, like any other Jiva. And between him and the other Jivas, including myself, there will be a difference. Also, between all these Anatmas and myself, there will be difference. All the way then there is difference. There being Dvaita between Jivas, Jagat and Ishvara. If there is Dvaita between the Jivas, between Jiva and Jagat, and between Jagat and Ishvara, if there is Dvaita between all these three, then your isolation is established. Mortality is established. Imperfection is established. Inadequacy is established, all of which are accompanied by fear, greed, pain, sorrow, etc. So the opposite of Dvaita is when you are in Advaita, then immortality is established. Perfection is established. security, not inadequacy, is established. And therefore, there is only love. There is no fear, greed, pain, nothing at all. There is only love and bliss.
Yeah, the opposite is the reality right now because we feel different.
Correct. We are
And
perhaps,
if it, we feel imperfect, aham kinchit dagna,
alpagnaha, kinchignaha.
when there is this non-duality, then there will be perfection, abundance, purnata.
Ego is ignorance based. Since ego implies isolation, behind every crime there is ego. But the yogi Krishna is talking about is the one who has pricked the bubble of this ego. The bubble ego is no longer there. One ocean alone is there. Ego is ignorance based, ignorance of Atma. Once the ignorance of Atma is gone, all that remains is one Atma, which is Param Brahma. There is no ego anymore. And when the ego is not there, where is the question of the person doing anything improper? The person abides in Ishvara alone. Mai eva vartate. But for the sake of argument, you can say that the person can do anything he or she likes. Even though the person still does various things, whatever these may be or however they are done, the person remains in me alone. This is the Shastra. Mai vartate. He remains in me alone. When the Lord says remaining in me alone, it means that the person is never separate from him. In other words, the person and the Lord are one and the same. A person who has this equal vision everywhere has no necessity to do things that are not in keeping with dharma. The person naturally sees that what is sukha for him or her is also sukha for others, and what is dukkha for him or her is dukkha for other people as well. So this Jiva Ishvara Dvaita is resolved over there. So he becomes non-separate from Ishvara. And then, therefore, whatever is sukha for him is sukha for others. So whatever is dukkha for him is dukkha for others. But the funny thing is, for him, sukha, dukkha are the same. He does not see a difference. But will the person who has this vision not compromise it in any way? After all, most people understand that what makes them happy or unhappy affects others in the same way. But still, they do not always behave according to dharma. Suppose something becomes so important to this person, is it not possible that the vision will be set aside, temporarily at least? In fact, this problem will not arise because for the person who has this vision, there is no notion that I am limited. There is knowledge that the same Atma is in all beings and all beings are in oneself, Atma alone. The ego for this person is badita, sublated. It is no more taken as real. Sarvabhutastam atmanam, sarvabhutani chatman. So he has this vision that the same Atma is in all beings and all beings are in oneself. So just like the camphor gets sublimated, the ego for him is sublimated. There is no remnant of ego for him. Therefore, there is no isolation. There is no Dvaita. It is only Advaita. Therefore, this person is one for whom ahimsa is natural, which is in fact the spirit of sannyasa. A person who has this clear vision of Atma, samyak darshana nishta, one who is naturally, spontaneously given to ahimsa, who no longer needs Just give me a second. I'm getting a call from my hospital. Yeah, I may need to leave any moment. So if I do, I would request anyone else to take over because I think Bela has also left. Yeah.
I am here, Brahmaraji, but I will be leaving soon.
Right. So I don't know. I'm getting
Around
a call from my hospital maybe 10 minutes from now. So till then, I will continue. We'll look at how we can go forward. Maybe
I
then.
can continue for a few more minutes, Brahmaraji. If you have emergency, I can continue
Fine.
for a few.
Fine. I'll let you know.
Yeah.
But will the person, yeah, that is done. Therefore, this person is one for whom ahimsa is natural, which is in fact the spirit of sannyasa. A person who has this clear vision of Atma, samyak darshana nishtha, who is naturally, spontaneously given to ahimsa, who no longer needs to practice ahimsa deliberately because it is his or her very nature, is described here as the most exalted parama among yogis. A second interpretation of the verse. We can look at this verse in another way using the option offered by the word va as or, by adding this va or to sukha and dukkha. Sukham va yadi va dukkham. Here, situations are categorized in a twofold way. Those producing sukha and those producing dukkha, both of which the wise person looks at equally. Samam pashyati. This means that for the person, sukha and dukkha are the same. Why? Because he or she looks at them both with the example of himself or herself alone. Atma being the example, the basis of measurement, the matrix of judgment, the person sees that which is equal in both sukha and dukkha. How is this possible? Because the person understands the nature of Atma as fullness, wholeness, and from this basis, he or she looks at Sukha and Dukkha. Both are within that fullness alone. This does not mean that the person does not meet with situations producing Sukha and Dukkha. The point being made here is that the person looks at all situations, even the Dukkha of death, from the basis of Atma alone. Because the person knows oneself, Atma as fullness, there is no ripple of reaction, whatever the situation. To put it in another way, when Sukha comes, the person's fullness does not increase, and when Dukkha comes, the fullness does not decrease, meaning that the person is always with Ishvara. Mayi eva vartate. There is no situation which is going to take the person away from Ishvara. This is the connection with the previous verse where it was said, whatever the person does, sarvatha vartamanaha api, there is no question of the person being away from me, Ishvara, or forgetting me, Ishvara, because of any situation involving dukkha or sukha. Why? Because Atma is the example, the basis, upama, for the person, the Atma that is aham, I. Previously, it was pointed out that Atma is Parameshwara, Paramatma. Therefore, Paramatma is the upama, the example for the person who comes to bear upon all situations with the fullness that is the nature of Atma. This particular interpretation is in keeping with the example of the river and the ocean in the second chapter of the Gita. So because he takes everything from the standpoint of Atma, and Atma is fullness. It is it's the ocean. It is not the wave. So there is no sukha and dukkha for him. Everything is the same. Every situation, whether it is death or whether it is something joyful, it does not cause a ripple in him. It does not cause a reaction. Because he is with that Atma Tattva. He is that no situation is going to take him away from Ishvara. He is in that Advaita Bhav. He is not the wave, he is the ocean. Apuryamānamacala pratishtam samudramāpah pravishanti yadvat tadvat kāmayam pravishanti sarve sashanti mapnoti na kāmakāmi. Apuryamānaha means fullness, that which is completely filled from all sides, like the ocean, samudra. Achala means that the ocean remains in its own glory and does not move around. Pratishtha is that which is well rooted, meaning the ocean is well rooted in its own glory. And into this ocean, waters enter. Apah pravishanti, from different directions. Is the ocean affected in any way by this event? Does the oceanness increase? No. And if no, waters enter for a time because of drought, etc., the oceanness also does not decrease. Oceans do not dry up, nor do they overflow. Such situations simply do not occur. What a lovely example in the physical world that we have, that we can relate to the state of being in that Atmajnan.
The ocean.
Ocean.
We never imagine ocean like that, right? That is kind of, so what happens to ocean's water then? It doesn't get evaporated and it comes back to the ocean. So it is always full. But that some of the seas is that not dried up or something, or maybe to the desolation probably dried up or something.
We've not heard of oceans drying up, no?
Not oceans, but like small, like what do you call that, sea or something like that. Even in Himalayas, it was covered by waters, they say, but in the past. But now, I don't know. It's just one of those things.
Yeah, ponds can dry up. That is what Swamiji talks about this later paragraph. Fullness depends on nothing. This example is a good one in terms of the fullness that is the nature of Atma. The example holds water, in other words. Whether the waters enter or do not enter, the ocean always remains the same. It is always oceanness because oceanness does not depend upon any other source of water to be ocean. Similarly here, the yogi, a wise person, who is Ananta, does not depend for his or her fullness upon a given situation. Whatever happens, sukha or dukkha, the person sees them both equally. Therefore, he or she remains tranquil. Sashantim apnoti. Whatever objects kamas enter, from whatever direction, through the gates of the 5 sense organs, they do not disturb the person at all. just as the ocean is not disturbed by the waters. If we can just bring this one, if we bring this one concept to our mind when we are faced with all these sensory inputs from the world and liken ourselves to the ocean, then we'll remain tranquil. Whereas the person who is a desirer of various objects, kama kami, who is dependent upon their presence or absence for his or her happiness, is likened to a pond. If too much water comes in the form of rain or floods, you do not see the pond at all. And if there is no rain, it dries up altogether. Similarly, the kama kami is like a yo-yo. If something desirable comes along, he or she goes up. And if it is something undesirable, the person goes down. However, for the yogi discussed here, there is no yo-yo because he or she remains with me, the self alone. Whatever the tragedy, even if it meets the classical orthodox definition of a genuine tragedy, the person remains the same. This is the yogi Krishna is discussing here in keeping with the previous verse. Thus, there are two interpretations possible here. The yogi remains the same in any situation, whether it be sukha or dukkha, and the yogi looks upon others as he or she looks upon himself or herself. This being so, the person will not perform a wrong action. To treat others as you would have them treat you is applicable to everyone, in fact. Every human being is supposed to live this way. What to talk of a yogi? Do you want me to repeat any paragraph? Or it's fine to go forward? So there is no yo-yo. Yo-yo for a kama-kami is there because there is this separation. So he can swing from sukha to dukkha. For a yogi who is in that fullness, where will he swing? Which yo-yo does he have? Because he's so full, there is only one. There is no question of yo-yo effect there. So even if he meets with a genuine tragedy, even if it is death, that is for a human being, that is the highest tragedy that one can go through in this physical body. Leaving the physical body is a big tragedy. So the person continues to remain the same. Therefore, he does not have mortality. When there is isolation, like the previous paragraph we read, when there is isolation, when there is ego, there is mortality, there is imperfection, there is sorrow, greed, fear, all that comes up. To hurt others is to be hurt in the process. No one can hurt another without getting hurt in the process, even though it may sometimes seem to be otherwise. We see this even in tennis matches. You begin with love and then you fight to win. And when you do win, you are ecstatic. On the way to the net to shake hands with your opponent, you jump up and down and throw your racket into the air. You are very happy until you see the other person's sadness in having lost. Then all your joy goes. Do you know why? Because no human heart was ever made that cannot empathize with a person who is sad. You know what it is to be on the other side of the net because you too have had days like that. Therefore, you cannot but pick up the other person's sadness immediately. Why? Because you can never hurt another without getting hurt in the process. It is just not possible. We think that there are criminals who have so hardened their hearts that they can automatically do harm to others. But this is not true. Even psychopaths have their spells of empathy because of how the human heart is. So this is another reason why the jnani does not hurt others. Number one, because he sees himself in others and he has that sameness. So he considers Atma as the example and then does not do any harm to anyone. Insecurity is the problem. That you cannot hurt another without being hurt in the process is a fact for which there is a very simple rule. All human beings must follow what we call the order of dharma. This is the common basis for everyone, although it is not commonly pursued because of fundamental insecurity. This fundamental insecurity is the human problem. The insecure person acts in unbecoming ways because there are priorities for the person based on likes and dislikes. Wherever these priorities are, there will be confusion in terms of values unless the person frees himself or herself from the sense of being small. The person who does this sees the sameness in all beings always. Sarvatra samam pashyati. It is very clear to such a person that whatever is good for himself or herself is good for others also. This then is the yogi whom Krishna praises here. Even a mature person who tries to follow dharma will breach it now and again because some priority or other will always be there. Thus, you find that there is legitimate criticism, legitimate hurting. Because you cannot always take the hurt, sometimes you will hurt back. And this is considered to be legitimate in human interaction. Only a jnani is able to view sukha or dukkha in the same manner, and therefore only a jnani can be free. This is why, with reference to all people, he or she is considered to be the most exalted. Sayogi paramo mataha. So he does not even do this legitimate criticism. He's just beyond even that. Thus, we have these two ways of looking at the verse. The first in keeping with the Shastra and the other in terms of behavior. One refers to the vision of the person and the other is expression in one's interaction. Thus, this much having been said, the topic of dhyana yoga, meditation, contemplation is complete. In fact, Krishna has actually covered the topic twice in two different ways. Thinking that he had done a good job, Krishna may have sat back a little bit. Seeing that Krishna had finished, Arjuna thinks it is a good time to ask a question and does so in the next two verses. These verses make the nature of Arjuna's problem very clear. Does anyone want to share or say anything?
Jai Gurudev, the insecurity and fear which is talked about in this this last few paragraphs. So is it like for the common man, or is it only described about the person on this path? Like
everyone is included there, no?
Everyone is included.
Common man included, including a person who's dharmic. As
only a person who is dharmic is included? I was just asking, like, or every person is included?
Yeah. See, that is why he says, no, even a mature person who tries to follow dharma will breach it now and again because some priority or other will always be there. Because that insecurity is deep seated there, as long as that is there, there may be a moment, a situation where he will breach it. Thus, you find that there is legitimate criticism, legitimate hurting. Only a jnani is able to view sukha, dukkha in the same manner, and therefore only a jnani can be free. This is that story of the Buddha and that businessman. He comes and he scolds Buddha and he spits on his face. Other devotees are very upset. They're all dharmic, yes, but they get legitimate, they're hurting them. I mean, it hurts them, this behavior. So they get angry and they say, how can you do such a thing? But then Buddha says no. And then the next day when the businessman goes back and tries to apologize, he says, no apology given. Why? Because you are not the same person as it was yesterday. So a jnani is able to view sukha, dukkha in the same manner. He is above this legitimate hurt and criticism even.
Yeah, I I had this confusion that this sentence is related to like only the jnani or the person on this path, dharma path. But if it is related to the common man, then like whatever crimes are happening, uh, they do in such a bad fashion, like in the armies, like what Nana ji was telling about the Ukraine, they mutilated the bodies and how they were made to suffer. So how come people can act that way? They don't. At that time they don't have any fear or insecurity. Still, they are acting in that manner. Just that, like I remembered Nanaji's explanation of I don't know which sloka was that, but he described about how the what is happening in Ukraine and all this. So I was just relating to that. For a common man, like they are not, they are, we read earlier also, they are not sensitive. They the more the person on the path of dharma, he will be more sensitive, and the person who is adharmic, not dharmic, then he'll be very insensitive. He will not figure out the he'll not be able to distinguish his own feelings and his own maybe he cannot experience properly the senses also, because the perception level is very poor. And
Correct. So he is very
he cannot find out he cannot he'll not experience the fear, and he won't feel the insecurity also while committing the crime, because the perception level is not very good. He's so insensitive, that's why he is performing those acts. So it was just a bit confusion here, that is it this statement for everyone, or is it for the dharmic person? This confusion was there.
in fact, the fear is there for everyone. Everyone who has the sense of separation has the fear, whether it is a common man who is adharmic or a dharmic person. As long as he is that jiva Ishvara Bheda is there is this fear. See, which is why an adharmic person, because of fear of losing his identity, or because of fear of he will do things according to his raga dvesha. Whereas the dharmic person, he will not follow his raga dvesha. He will do what is supposed to be done. He still has that fear.
Right.
And And therefore he continues. So I think this fear factor is independent of whether a person is dharmic or adharmic.
Okay.
It might seem that he's so tamasic, the adharmic person, that he is not sensitive and he's doing things. It seems as if he is fearless, but actually it is basically out of fear that he does everything. Isn't it?
Yeah, right. Thank you.
Also, we need to keep in mind that in the military they require the emotions of anger, etc. And the indoctrination given there is one of hinsa, whereas here we are all practicing ahimsa, non-violence. There they simulate conditions wherein stressful conditions in which they have to keep a calm mind and work their way out. All the obstacle courses, the thorn wires through which they have to go through during their combat training, all is towards violence. How they have to finally get out of that tunnel-like thing of thorn wires and go and then attack the enemy and kill. So the indoctrination there is of violence, and that is needed if you are in the army. Otherwise, you would not be able to do a proper job as a soldier. Your dharma is to, at that time in the military, maybe to attack the enemy and overpower it, kill it. So we have to look at it in a very different way altogether. If military people start following non-violence, there would be no war and
No, there will be a disruption in the societal structure.
yes.
Oh, that is what Krishna is telling to pick up the bow and hit, no? Because he is following his dharma.
No, I think what Savita's question was whether this fear is only for fear, greed, or applies to a dharmic person, or is it to everyone? Isn't that your question, Savitaji?
Yeah, that was the question.
But a dharmic fellow always will be in the fear itself, you know. He does everything, as Brahmaraji told, he does everything with fear consciousness only. A dharmic fellow.
He's not aware.
That's what. He is
Yes.
always insecure. He always is insecure.
Even when we talked about the Ukraine war with Russia and all, the soldiers mutilating bodies or, indulging in a lot of violence, breaking bones before killing people, all those things that are reported, they need to do that so that the enemy gets frightened. They lay down their arms and surrender. And in fact, that would bring about less killings if one party was to surrender. So they do have to do all these things. That is a part of their indoctrination in the military. The terrorists do the same thing. When they had attacked at Taj and Oberoi, they broke the bones of the people before shooting them down. And that created an impact on the mind of the people who were watching this happening, who somehow escaped with their lives. It created a very big trauma for them. But for them, it is their indoctrination. They have to indulge in violence. For us, it is not to sit in judgment over everybody, to accept them as they are. And then if we can bring about transformation in them like we do with terrorists, we do it. Not to sit in judgment is important.
Yeah. So should we do Manana on this and then go to Arjuna's questions tomorrow?
Yeah, I think
Is anyone, we'll do Manana on this. And is anyone ready with the second shloka for our Swadhyaya? Otherwise, I will.
Today, I just seek your blessings, all of you. Today, like I have planned a camp in one of the slums, and I'll be going and doing like seeing the patients there. So it's
Wonderful.
my start of the social work from today. And
Very
that
good.
with your blessings. Yeah.
Of course, you have
I was,
Kiteya's blessings with you.
I was planning from last 1 year, but
Very
it's,
good.
yeah.
Excellent. Wonderful.
Nice, Dr. Shantarji.
Very good. So I'll attempt in explaining the second shloka. Does anyone want to share anything? Because I'm only a little mindful, I might get a call from my hospital anytime. So today I will just go through the second shloka of the sixth chapter. Yesterday, Bela started it off so beautifully. So we'll continue this exercise. This is also what Nana has always been wanting us to do. If you remember, he said 2-3 times he reminded, and then he said, you will have to do it yourself. So I will urge and encourage every one of us here to read the sixth chapter. And any one of you keen to do the third shloka tomorrow, you can come prepared and then you can share the third.
Spare me for 2-3 days. I am in a marriage season.
No problem.
I come out. Somehow yesterday I could not attend. Today I'm somehow making room to attend.
No problem.
Thank
So
you.
what I will do is I just went through the beginning introduction of the sixth chapter, and how very nicely Bela explained yesterday. Krishna talks of, the Swamiji talks of 2 types of sadhanas, Bahiranga sadhana and Antaranga sadhana. Bahiranga sadhana is being a karma yogi, that is outwardly. So, and that is for Antakarana Shuddhi. Whereas Antaranga sadhana, dhyana is considered as Antaranga sadhana, and this is to attain Antakarana Naischalya. Naischalya is that stillness of the mind, that tranquility of the mind. So both these are required for self-recognition, Atma, to recognize Atma. So, and then he describes dhyana as a mental activity. It is a manasa vyaparaha. It is a mental activity. And then he contrasts between worry versus dhyana. He says worry is also mental activity. But does that mean you're doing antaranga sadhana? He says no, because in dhyana, you meditate upon a predetermined concept. That is Saguna Brahma. Saguna Brahma, Manasa Vyaparaha is dhyana. And what we do in contemplation versus dhyana. Dhyana and contemplation, he's contrasted. In contemplation, in Nididhyasana, we do Nirguna Brahma Manasa Vyapara. We think about, contemplate upon the attributeless aspect of Brahma. Whereas in dhyana, we do the Saguna Brahma Manasa Vyapara. And how do we do that? It is not just fleeting moment. You don't just think of Atma, Brahma just once in the morning, once in the afternoon, once in the night. That does not become dhyana. For a length of time, you bring your mind again and again back to this, the Saguna Brahma Vishaya. And he talks of, Shankaracharya gives the definition of dhyana as Vijatiya Vritti vijatiya pravaha rahita sajatiya pravaha sahita. So you remove all those, when your mind is getting distracted onto different aspects, vijatiya vritti. So the different aspects, you bring them back, bring the mind back and hook it on to the Saguna Brahma Vishaya. So that was the explanation and the introduction to the Dhyana Yoga. And as the first shloka talks of, I'll just project the first shloka. 1 second. Yeah. The first shloka was Anashrita karma phalam karyam karu sanyasi cha yogi cha na niragnir na chakriyah.
We are not seeing the screen.
You're not seeing the screen, no? 1 second, let me show the screen.
I can see.
You can see right now, no? So, Sri Bhagavanuvacha anashritah karma phalam karyam karma karoti yaha sasanyasi cha yogi cha na niragnir na chakriyah. Sri Bhagavan uvacha yah karma phalam anashritah karyam karma karoti sah sanyasi cha yogi cha na niragnihi na cha akriyah. So the one who performs action that is to be done without depending on the result of action, he is also a sannyasi and a yogi, and not just the sannyasi who has renounced all fire rituals and who does not perform any other action. So the whole gist of this that Swamiji explained was a yogi, that is a karma yogi, is one who acts in the world and does things according to what is to be done in a dharmic way, setting aside his own ragadveshas. So because he is giving up his ragadveshas, he is also considered a sannyasi. Whereas an actual sannyasi is one who gives up all these fire rituals. He gives up this nitya naimitika karma, all this all other activities he gives up, the sannyasi. And his sacrifice is
including cooking also. So he takes the food by bhiksha.
by begging, by bhiksha.
Begging.
Correct. No. So in this verse, Krishna is drawing a parallel between a karma yogi as well as a sannyasi. So he says he is both a yogi and a sannyasi. Why? Karma yogi and sannyasi are the same, so to say, is what Krishna is mentioning here. Because both are giving up. A karma yogi is giving up his raga dveshas, which is also sacrificing, isn't it? And a sannyasi is giving up all his nitya naimitika karmas. Conformity to dharma, the value of, so he looks at the value of values, and this in order to recognize the value of the value, you're required to be alert. And the second line also he says, Nani Ragnihi na Chakriyaha. A sannyasi is not one who just gives up these fire rituals. A sannyasi gives up all other activities. In fact, he has no roles, even either as a son or a daughter, parent or so. This person here is referred to as akriya. And then he comes to the second verse. which is Yam Sanyasamiti Prahuhu Yogam Tam Vidhi Pandava Nahya Sanyasta Sankalpo Yogi Bhavati Kaschana. Pandava, O son of Pandu, Arjuna, Yam, that which, Sanyasam iti, as renunciation, Prahuhu, they say, Tam, that, Yogam, as Karma Yoga, Vidhi, no, he, because, Kaschana, anyone, Asanyasta Sankalpaha, who has not given up desires for limited results like heaven, etc., Yogi, Karma Yogi, na bhavati, does not become. Pandava yam sannyasam iti prahuhu tam yogam vidhi hi kaschana asanyasta sankalpaha yogi na bhavati. So basically, when they say what they say as renunciation, know that to be karma yoga, O Pandava, because anyone who has not given up desires for limited results like heaven, etc., does not become a karma yogi. So from what I understood of this verse, I will just present, and then maybe I would encourage all of us to go and read the PDF once again. So then we get it clearer. Is that a karma yogi is one who gives up all desires. When it says all desires, it does not mean that the karma yogi does not have raga dveshas. He has raga dveshas, but he goes through them along the dharmic way. He does not, for instance, step aside dharma and go the adharmic way, while prioritizing what is to be done. That becomes a karma yogi. And unless we have had this karma yoga aspect in us, we are not ready for dhyana yoga to happen. So we should have first, as the first step, we should have cleared up our, got that clarity of whether we are following raga dvesha or are we following what is to be done, and whether we are following it in a dharmic way. So all these three aspects will bring in that is nothing but the bahiranga sadhana, is the sadhana that we do outwardly. So we calm the mind, we purify the mind, and then in that purified mind, dhyana yoga can happen. Yeah, so I will encourage everyone to also come up. Anyone who wants to take the third shloka can come prepared for tomorrow. So that is what Nana had said. Karma yoga comes in and through the Bhagavad Gita. So again and again, the first step that we have to remind ourselves is to perform karma yoga. And being a karma yogi is number one, you'll do what is to be done, and you do it in a dharmic way, freeing yourself from raga dveshas. You do not put this filter of raga dveshas in there. Otherwise, your priorities will change and you will be led away into performing adharmic ways. So being mindful, being alert, moment to moment about whether you are following according to what is to be done or you are just following your raga dveshas. Simple example that comes to my mind is a teacher who's the mother of a child also in the class. Her child is one of her students. And if this mother, who's the teacher, notices that the child has made a mistake, she has to correct him or her, and not bring in the filter of raga dvesha. Oh, he's my child. How can I humiliate him in front of everyone? It might be not an, I mean, this is the example that comes to my mind. So if the teacher is a true karma yogi, he or she will be able to actually handle and point out the mistake, and maybe corrective steps you can bring the child to the side. And in any case, you will not do that to any child, whether it is your child or another child. But pointing out the mistake is important. You cannot condone the child because he is your son or daughter, he or she. Then in which case you are exercising your raga dveshas. So being a karma yogi, in everything that we do, bringing in the attitude of karma yoga, doing it 100%, and letting go of the consequence and taking the consequence of the result, however it comes, with a smile. That is the aspect of a karma yoga, of a karma yogi. I would encourage everyone to also share. If you want to share your thoughts on this.
That's very nice way of reviewing the karma yogi part, Dr. Ramara. I first sentence, you do what is to be done, and then not
Yeah.
expect.
1 second. Hello.
Yeah.
So I will have to leave now.
Yeah.
You can
We'll-
continue. I will log in from my mobile. Another 10 minutes, 8 minutes, we can do Manana on this. Okay, so.
I really didn't, I was in and out of this lecture today, so I didn't really get into it too much. So I may have to do it tomorrow, the third sloka. I'll do that.
So maybe we'll just chant the Shanti part if no one is sharing anything. Om Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. Jai Gurudev.